Hey there guys and gals, Anime Dude here, and while I initially wanted to kick off 2021 with a long-awaited re-ranking of every series currently serialized in Weekly Shonen Jump, there's been a bit of a change of plans. You see, Jump always has a break at the end of December each year, and while I originally thought of that as an opportunity to do my current re-rankings, I figured ranking every single manga from Weekly Shonen Jump that concluded in 2020 may be a better place to start. I mean, there's quite a few. I only first fully caught up on this magazine back in March of 2020, and since then, over half of the series that I ranked have already been concluded. Some were old, some were new, and some were so new that they started and concluded within that 9-month span. It's been hectic to say the least, and here on this channel I've covered each manga that started in Weekly Shonen Jump since I got caught up. So, remember to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out on future new series that I cover, or my re-rankings video for 2021 whenever that drops. Anyways, it's been a fun journey, and likewise, I'm ecstatic to go back and reminisce about each series that ended this past year, so without any further ado, let's get right into it. Okay, so Zipman is a story about two brothers and superheroes and stuff, and yeah, there's two brothers, and you know, I want to cover these series that I ranked lower quickly. So essentially, the pacing was heavily rushed and the storyboarding was a mess, and it truly doesn't surprise me that this manga also rushed to its cancellation at record speed. With all due respect to the author of this series, since I know making any manga is loads of work, this series just wasn't very good. Possibly the worst manga I've ever read, simple as that. At number 12, we have Bone Collection. In a world swarming with yokai demons, we have a story where an exorcist falls in love with a powerful yokai. 'Twas a battle/comedy series that focused way too hard on its lackluster comedy in my opinion. I think chapter 1 started out with potential, but the ending to chapter 2 was the start of a downward spiral, and from there, it continuously got worse rather than better. It didn't last long, so the finale was a bit rushed, but this was a series that I think would have disappointed me even if it did get more time to let everything play out. 'Twas personally one of the biggest disappointments I've had in all my time with Jump thus far. Alright, well next up on the list, we have a series that only seemed to teeter on the edge of potential the last time I talked about it, and it's called Guardian of the Witch. Man, I don't know how good or bad this one could have been, but I do know it was cancelled before we ever really found out. With its total chapters being in the teens, this is one of those manga where the mangaka themselves only ever got to show us the beginning and end of what they had in store, with what was in between essentially being glossed over. It could have turned into a decent little series, but it was so rushed that it never really got the chance. Shame to see that happen so often here in the magazine known as Weekly Shonen Jump. As a huge fan of Naruto, I really wanted Kishimoto's follow-up work to do well, but I guess I just never really got too invested. The story centers around a kid who becomes a space pirate android thing or something. I don't know, it's kind of a hard plot to explain unless you experience it for yourself. It had some relatively hard-hitting moments, but all in all, this truly does pale in comparison to Naruto. I mean, don't get me wrong, I didn't have my expectations too overly high going into it, because I do believe in judging a work based on its own merits when all is said and done. But still, even with that being said, it was a pretty below average series at the end of the day. Can't say I'd recommend it. Enough said, moving on. Well, in order to put an end to all the series I found to be rather lackluster is Mitama Security, a series I found to be a pretty average comedy manga. A girl that attracts and befriends ghosts meets an agent that exorcises them, and that essentially sums it up. It got some genuine laughs out of me, but I didn't really find it to be all that special when all was said and done. But I mean, as a gag manga, it sets out to get laughs, and it genuinely accomplished that at times throughout my read-through, so I mean, if you ever find yourself looking for more comedy manga to read, this one could be well worth your time. I'd say it leans closer to below average than it does above average, but the main character did get buckets at times, so I mean, yeah, let's just go with average. Yep, average, that's this. If you're someone who's seen the rankings video I made for 2020, I made a mistake where I excluded Yuna and the Haunted Hot Springs, and instead I included a Shonen Jump Plus series that was serialized weekly called Hell's Paradise. It was an honest mistake on my part, but one I'm still pretty ashamed of. You see, with Jump's new digital format, Yuna was the only manga in the magazine not licensed by Viz or included on the Shonen Jump app, and due to my lack of knowledge at the time, I had assumed Hell's Paradise was in it as well since it had a weekly schedule that matched the other series in Weekly Shonen Jump. The minor distinctions were confusing, but I'd like to think I learned a thing or two since then, so no need to worry about any mistakes like that happening from here on out. Anyways, while I feel bad about leaving out Yuna and the Haunted Hot Springs in my first Shonen Jump ranking video, I made sure to go back and give it a read through so that I can give it a proper placement here. In fact, that's actually one of the main reasons this video took as long as it did. In this story, our main character Kogarashi can see spirits, becomes an exorcist, and then encounters our beautiful silver-haired heroine. Though she's a ghost, he decides to help her find peace before she turns into an evil spirit. While that synopsis sounds like it could lead to anything, I'd say this series was primarily an ecchi/harem series that remained in Weekly Shonen Jump for nearly 4.5 years. I mean, lasting that long in Jump is no small feat, so needless to say my expectations were pretty high. As to whether or not it lived up to those expectations, I mean, it had a ton of Bobs in it, and while I love Bobs as much as the next guy, the ludicrous amount of ecchi moments in this series is more than I ever expected from a Shonen Jump manga in particular. There's at least like 20 girls we're introduced to, most of which feel some type of way about the wholesome yet OP main character, and basically all of them sit on his face or get groped at one point or another. Because of the easily predictable and repetitive nature of the shenanigans, I didn't get too into this manga until I was about 120 chapters in, but even after that, I wasn't too drawn in by the story itself. It relied too much on cute girls getting into lewd scenarios, but while I hate to admit it, it was also pretty good because it had a bunch of cute girls getting into lewd scenarios. I personally found it to be a bit lackluster overall, but I think part of that was just me setting my expectations too high, because it does what it does exceptionally well, and it eventually did get a bit more serious before wrapping up in a satisfying way. This manga had a great run in Weekly Shonen Jump, I had a fun time reading it, and it's a shame it had to be ranked this low, but if anything that's just a testament to how good the top half of this list was. Time Paradox Ghostwriter is a series about a mangaka that accidentally plagiarizes a series from a Jump volume that came from 10 years in the future. It sets up an interesting premise, instantly gave the protagonist an insane sense of guilt he had no choice but to bear, and the art was astounding. However, this was one of the series on this list that was controversial for one reason or another. In this case, from chapter 1, Japanese audiences didn't take well to the main character committing an act of plagiarism. In fact, I genuinely think he might have been better off murdering someone in cold blood. The story seemed to bring some originality at a time where Jump seemed to be lacking it, and a relatable, hardworking, down on his luck 20-something-year-old protagonist having to cope with the fact that he accidentally committed one of the worst sins an artist can commit? I mean, it was gripping from the get-go. However, after initially getting my attention, the story was a bit rushed, and you can tell it didn't play out exactly how the authors originally wanted it to. But I want to clarify yet again that I don't put this blame on the authors, and I feel like this story could have definitely been something special if not for the controversy over its plot. Regardless, I'm really looking forward to what both the author and artist bring us going forward, because the talent they put on display in this series was promising to say the least. Okay, at number 6 we have a really solid rom-com manga called We Never Learn. In this series, our main character ends up tutoring a few of his classmates, and there's a ton of focus on helping them study. I know, sounds boring as heck. But, to my surprise, this wholesome romantic comedy was able to make that plotline both interesting and endearing, as each of the potential love interests that he tutors are likable in their own way. As an example, the first two girls we meet are geniuses at one topic each, but they choose the harder path of pursuing their interests instead. It's a really solid series, and while all the characters are pretty likable in their own way, it doesn't really matter which of the 5 girls you personally like best, because they each get their own personalized ending. It's kind of like a visual novel in that sense, because you know, most people that read this series are going to have their own favorite girl, and no matter which one it is, they get a great conclusion to their own story. The ending was just executed so well, and it simply leaves you feeling satisfied after you finish reading it, and I'm not sure that's something most rom-coms can say, you know? Anyways, 'twas a solid series that I do recommend for anyone who enjoys a good old well-executed rom-com. At number 5, we have Demon Slayer. I'm sure most of you don't need me to explain what Demon Slayer is about, but for those of you that do, it's about a boy who slays demons. Anyways, I know this positioning may seem low with how popular Demon Slayer is, but as much as I like the series overall, it didn't really stand out to me too much personally as anything too special by the time it concluded. In fact, the ending itself kinda let me down a lot, though I was thankful it ended in the way it wanted rather than trying to drag things out because of its popularity. All in all, I did like Demon Slayer, and I'm happy that the anime adaptation was good and that it was able to garner a massive fanbase due to the quality of that adaptation. But I can't bring myself to place the manga any higher on this here list because there are some real heavy hitters above it. Gosh dang it, we saw a lot of great series end in 2020. At number 4, we have a bit of a technicality that made me struggle a bit when deciding whether to include it, but of course I couldn't leave it out. You see, in late 2020, we saw the end of Chainsaw Man Part 1 in Weekly Shonen Jump, and it was a wild freaking ride that I loved every second of. But I say Part 1 because the story as a whole isn't over yet, and it'll be continuing at some point in Shonen Jump Plus. There's not really much I can say to do the synopsis or characters justice, but I mean it has a chainsaw man. So if nothing else, if it has your interest even a little tiny bit, just try it out, okay? Coming in at number 3, we have a series called The Promise Neverland. Almost any other year, I don't think it would be surprising for this to make a push for number 1, to be honest. I love The Promise Neverland. And if you're watching this video without knowing what it's about, I want you to do me a favor and go into this manga completely blind. Just trust me, it's great and I'd say it's a must-read series. Okay, so remember earlier when I said that Time Paradox Ghost Rider was only one of the series with controversy surrounding it? Welp, Act Age is much worse, and I'm not only sad it ended so soon, but that it ended how it did. I guess I never made a designated video to address this specific controversy, but that's because when the news broke, I was genuinely shocked and in disbelief. I guess I should start by saying that Act Age is a story about acting, and as the main heroine goes down the path of method acting in particular, she does so while trying to overcome the potential psychological pitfalls. While doing so, she became one of my favorite female protagonists of all time in the process, especially in Jump. No offense to Emma from The Promise Neverland or any other female protagonist in Jump, it's just that Kay was better. She grew a ton over the course of multiple long arcs that I never hesitated to rate a 10 out of 10, so I thought that this manga could be the future of Jump and that it would shock everyone once the anime adaptation was announced. 'Tis the reason I still couldn't help but to place it so high on this list. But the manga was created by two people, a writer and an artist. The artist is a young talented lady who I wish nothing but the best for, and the writer, well, you see, that's where the controversy comes in. He was caught committing sexual assault of the groping variety on a couple of different underage middle school girls. Suddenly, the whole world was talking about Act Age, but not for the reasons that I had hoped. I don't really want to dwell on this tragedy for too long so close to the end of this video, though my heart really does go out to the young ladies and families affected by his actions. I mean, if he was caught groping two girls in broad daylight on the same day, I can't help but to wonder how many times he did things like that without getting caught, you know? Jump's decision to cancel Act Age was the right one in my opinion, but whether you're someone who can separate the art from the artist or not, I'm someone who was already a huge fan of the story and the characters in it. In fact, as cruel fate would have it, I got the first volume that I had pre-ordered on the same day that the news broke. That was just tragic. That was supposed to be a good day. But my point is, While I do agree that canceling this series was the right thing, I couldn't exclude it from this list, and I couldn't give it a placement that didn't reflect its quality as a series, incomplete though it may be. It just wouldn't feel right. Looking back on these lists in future years, I want to be able to say I acknowledge both the controversies around these series as well as their worth as a manga, their worth as a piece of art. So, while this may be the last time I talk about Act Age here on this channel, I do want it to be known that it was my second favorite manga in Weekly Shonen Jump that ended in 2020. It was a fantastic journey that I'll never forget. But on a more upbeat note, and without any further ado, we still have one more entry on this list, and I bet most of you know what it is. The best Weekly Shonen Jump manga that ended in 2020 was without a single doubt in my mind, Haikyuu. If you somehow don't know, Haikyuu is a sports manga centered around volleyball, and I don't think it'd be a stretch to call it the peak of modern shonen. This is especially true considering the fact that it has a great unrushed and well-executed ending, and had it ended before I ranked everything back in March of 2020, let's just say it would have ranked even higher. I don't want anybody to sleep on this series because while I may be hyping it up a bit too much, it's just so well executed all around. From the subtle character developing details and lovable cast, to the themes tackled over the course of its run, to the little tidbits of well-executed humor. It doesn't really give me much of anything to complain about, and while it's only my third favorite sports series of all time, I have no doubt that I'll remember Haikyuu as a top tier series for so long as I shall live. And with that, I think we've concluded my top Shonen Jump manga that ended in 2020. Like I said earlier, I had to read Yuna in its entirety before I can make this video, so it took a bit longer than I wanted, but hopefully afterwards I can still re-rank all the current Shonen Jump manga exactly 1 year after I first did so. If videos like this interest you, let me know by subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing with friends. If this video does well enough, I've been considering the possibility of gradually going back through time and ranking all the Jump manga that ended in each given year. I think that could be a heck of a lot of fun if I could find the time. Speaking of people who helped me find the time to make this video into reality though, a huge thank you to Kara Alter, Murdoch, Love Phenomenon, Langert, Soulslayer, Gamer, Gentleman, Genkotaku, Red Emperor, Wolflord, Shelly, Rubo, and everyone else over on Patreon. I really can't thank you all enough. If you ever want to join these absolute mad lads right here, then I'll leave a link down in the description below. Also, if you haven't already, remember to go drop a follow on Twitch where I stream at least every other day, and we talk quite a bit about various anime/manga. Would love to have you along for the ride. Links to all that down in the description below. Thank you all again for watching, and Anime Dude out.